Painting the walls of an old building can be a very daunting job, and to be very honest, traditional paint as we know it is not going to cut it. It doesn't look right with plastic-based paints or acrylic-based paints. Those walls from those old buildings were in the past always painted with chalk-based paint, water and chalk, and the farmers painted their farms white because chalk is white, and not just because they liked it, but really because to disinfect the walls, and they did do it every year. So that's where it's coming from. So a lot of the old buildings that are around, like this old farm, have to be painted with a chalk-based paint. Now, painting with real chalk is a bit of an issue, as it doesn't last on the walls. It kind of disappears after a year or so. It rains off. So we need to look for other alternatives, and I have a paint here, right here, and this is what we call the Oikos paint, and it's great paint. It's chalk based, and it's pretty thick, as you can see. I'm just going to stick it in here, and you know, it's so thick even that, you know, it's almost like butter. That's how thick it is. And if you have to put it on the wall, it takes a lot of effort. You will have to have a broom or a brush like this, and I call it a broom because it's almost like a broom, and it's typically the one that you use to put the wallpaper up, to put the glue on the wallpaper. That worked out for me the best. So if you have a small surface to do, you will have to have one of these brushes to put the chalk-based paint on. Now, the good thing about the chalk-based paint is that it's all natural, and they let your wall breathe. The drawback is it's a bit tough to put it on, especially since the walls will probably be a bit abrasive. And secondly, you will have to go in the bucket and all the time and then smear it out. So it takes a bit of muscle to do it. But then again, it's a good physical exercise, right? So you don't have to go to the gym. But nevertheless, if the surface is a bit bigger, then you have to find another way. And many people told me there is no other way, this paint is too thick, you can't do it. Well, I didn't agree with them, so what I've done, I went for a airless system, and this happens to be a Mark V, which I acquired on the second-hand market, but you can rent them as well. And those machines, they actually will suck up the paint from the bucket right here and then push it out under high pressure to the final nozzle and the air gun or that you have, and then you can just spray the wall the way you like to, and it goes very, very fast. Now, once you've got the paint on the wall, then you still need to use the brush to rub it open a bit to get the effect of the streaks or the lines in the chalk like it was done with a paintbrush, because yeah, an air gun doesn't really give you that. It's a very smooth surface, so it's always good to go over it afterwards with the normal brush. Now, if you go for an airless system, and I do say airless because you shouldn't use a system with air because it just cannot spray it, then you got to make sure that the nozzle is big enough. So it's a quite big nozzle, and I'll show you that in a minute in a close-up. So that's the way I do it, and you'll see it in a few minutes when I'm actually applying it. The other thing you will need is actually a mixer, which I have here. So you will have to mix the chalk-based paint every so often, because the chalk has the tendency to sink down into the bucket all the way on the bottom, and then you have a thick thing underneath, and then the top is more liquid. So you have to stir it up every so often. I would say around every 10 to 15 minutes. Now, once you apply that paint on the wall, you got to make sure your wall is dry, that the wall has no loose particles, and that the wall is in a fairly good condition. Because if it's not going to help you very much. Now, how long does this paint last on the wall? Well, that depends a bit where you live. And if you live in a climate where it's very humid and it rains a lot, then obviously it's not going to last as long. Then you live in a very dry climate with a little bit of rain. I live in Belgium, and I can say that the paint that I have here on this farm is lasting about 4 to 5 years, and then I have to redo it. So the bottom line is that if you want to apply chalk-based paint on a wall, then the best thing to do is go for an airless system, which is nothing more than a high pressure pump, which is sucking up the paint from the bucket and then feeds it through the hoses to the actual air gun, which I have right here. You will need quite some pressure. It's around 150 bar. That's going to be the pressure you're going to need. So you will have to make sure when you rent a pump or you buy one that it can deal with that. The other important factor is that the nozzle, which is right here, has to be big enough. Now if you go for a Greco, you have to make sure you have the Rack 5 nozzle and the number 512, because that's very important, because you need to have the right opening, as you can see on the nozzle. If not, the paint won't come through and it will block. While you're spraying, the arrow has to point in that direction so the paint comes out. It may be that you have small particles inside your paint that are blocking the nozzle. Well, then just let the level go and then turn around the arrow like this and then spray shortly again, because that will then blow out the little blocking particle which was sitting on the other side before. Works perfectly. It doesn't happen quite often, but it can happen. And now I'll show you how you actually do it. So all of the non-believers that you cannot paint Oikos paint, chalk-based paint, on a wall because it's so thick with an airless system are wrong. I've been doing it now for quite some years, and it does not wear out my pump. It does not cause more wear and tear, and it's just perfect. Now, I have to be very careful when I say this. Don't add small sand particles to your paint, because some people do that to have it even a bit more rough. If you put the sand in your paint, then obviously you can't use your pressure system, because that will wear out the pump very, very quickly, and it will block for sure all the time the nozzle. So the first thing we'll do is open up the bucket and stir up the paint so it's nice and smooth, and for that one you will need a paint mixer. And once you've done that, the best thing is to put all the paint back into a big bucket like this. And then we'll dilute it with 25 to 30%. And I will actually dilute it first in my bucket, so I get all the remaining paint out of it. And we'll stir it up again. All right, so that's done. Now the next step is that we pour it back in the big bucket. So I had diluted the paint. I put the paint back into this bucket, and then I placed the pump in it. So now the pump has been primed. The airless gun is ready to go, and now we can apply the paint. The pressure is around 120 bar, so that should be more than sufficient. So let's get on with it. Painting the wall isn't that hard. You have to keep it around 30 centimeters from the wall, and then it will be all right. So let's have a look. And as you can see, this goes very smoothly and very fast. And it doesn't take a lot of effort. And you can see how nicely the beam is as well. You can almost draw a line with it. So here's my brush, and I will go over it real quick, so it gives me that effect of I did it completely with a brush. And this is very easy to do. There we go. And it only takes a few minutes to do it. And within no time, you completed a whole wall. I hope you enjoyed my video, and I'll see you on my next one. Thank you for viewing.